Hi, my name is Tyler Esselman.
And I'm Michael Osinski.
And you are listening to This One Goes to 11.
This One Goes to 11. It's a podcast that Tyler and I have where we invite someone to talk with us about music, specifically about an album that they believe is perfect.
Specifically an album that they believe is so perfect that 10 out of 10 is not good enough.
No way.
No. No.
So just want to let our listeners know I am not auditioning for the bass line in an a cappella group this week. I've just had some really bad allergies. So you get to hear deep Michael this week.
Are you more of a baritone typically, or what's your...
No, I was bass in my a cappella group on campus. Yeah. Yes, I was in an a cappella group in college. This should not surprise anyone.
It surprises me a little bit, actually, that you were. But
I'm multifaceted, Tyler.
I also think people would expect me to be in an a cappella group more than they would expect you to be in an a cappella group, and I was not. So,
well, I was not surprised when I learned you were in marching band, though.
Oh, God damn it!
But you should take that as you're an adult now. That's a compliment. Like when you're an adult, it becomes a compliment. So
yeah, I get that. Collaboration. It's all different forms. Of that, right?
Anyway, we're vamping, and I shouldn't be talking this much because of my voice.
Michael is experiencing. All right, I'll talk a little bit before you do the bio for our lovely guest today. Michael's experiencing some allergies. Canton, New York is in the springtime is bringing it all out of him.
It's brutal.
But we have another guest today who happens to be lives in, and works in Canton, New York, and is really a wonderful guest. And Michael, who are we talking to?
We're talking to Manny Citera. Manny Citera is a creative, free-spirited Aquarius who applies creativity and artistic skills to multiple interests while struggling to search for a common thread among them. Hear that, Manny. He moved to the U.S. in 2017 and got his Ph.D. in economics at the New School for Social Research in New York. He is currently an assistant professor of economics at St. Lawrence University, where he teaches and researches financial and monetary economics and complexity economics. But he has also been a guitar player for over 20 years, performing in rock bands, blues bands, acoustic sets, and jazz ensembles. And last year, he released an instrumental song called 10 Years, Simply Me, available on his website, which we'll share in the episode description.
It's Manny Citera. And so this is the second member of the economics faculty at St. Lawrence University that has been a guest on the podcast, right?
This is true. And our third PhD now.
Our third PhD, my God.
I know.
We didn't even talk about the fact that Sahar, I mean, I'm assuming he knows Sahar was on, right?
Yeah, he does. Yeah, I think they talked about it. Yeah,
cool. Yeah. Could not be a more different album that Manny brought than what Sahar brought. Which is Sahar brought?
Yeah, I think so.
I think what this is telling us is that economists are kind of groovy. They're kind of far out. Like they don't get the credit they deserve for being pretty kooky and cool.
Appropriate to use the word groove there, Tyler.
Ooh, little foreshadowing, little breadcrumb.
Yeah.
This is one of my all-time favorite bands that we're talking about, and a really killer album. Your dad probably loves this album, and with good cause. It's the best. So, should we not keep them waiting any longer, Michael?
No, we should get right into this, everybody.
Let's talk to Manny.
Manny Citera, welcome to This One Goes to 11. How you doing?
Hey, guys, I'm doing great. How about you?
Oh, you know.
Excellent. It's a beautiful morning here in Los Angeles.
Also here in Canton, we got like this touch of summer, I should say, not even of spring. That makes it feel like we are in LA, I feel, right?
Yeah, it's a bit too hot for me. Like I want spring first, then we can get to summer.
Yeah, I know, but there are no more, now there is no more changes. Either you're into the summer or the winter, so that's what it looks like.
Well, Manny, could you please tell us what album hath thou brought before the tribunal today?
Well, that's actually the Steely Dan album that I've been falling in love with. And, I've thought about like having a bit of conversation about that. And, I fell in love with this band when was 2 years ago? When the quarantine started, when was 3 years ago? Now I'm losing track of time. Yeah, 3 years ago, yeah. Yeah, when time goes fast, yeah. And exactly. So, and that was the album that I discovered later on, though. At the beginning I knew I knew the band like only a couple of songs, but then I got more into that.
So this is okay. So this is a recent discovery for you. Oh, that makes it even more
Yeah,
even
yeah,
more
yeah. It was very
interesting.
recent. Like, before that, I think I just heard to the song "Do It Again" because it was one of the most famous. Even there, back home, but I never really been into Steely Dan. I barely knew who they were, so that was really a big change for me 3 years ago.
This is I will show my cards a little bit and say that this Steely Dan is one of my favorite bands of all time. So I'm going to do my best to remain objective as you make your case for why this album is perfect, but I just have to in the spirit of journalistic integrity, I have to show that I have some biases here and that I will be rooting for you to make a strong case for why Can't Buy a Thrill by Steely Dan is a perfect album.
Right. It's I think that they are an amazing band. So I'm a musician, right? I've been playing guitar for now it's gonna be about 23 years. Yeah, because I started when I was 10. So I've been playing for a long time. And I always like the kind of thing that you have a band when they do a bit of rock, a bit of jazz, a bit of Latin, when they mix all this thing with this kind of funk groove and stuff. And I'm like, oh, Jesus, that's a band probably I've been looking for a long time and never been able to find it. Yeah. So when it just pop up into my Spotify track, I was like, oh, wow, that's probably what I was looking for. And then I start to listen to the band all day long for probably 3 years from now. Yeah.
Yeah. The algorithm was kind to you in that moment. It knew exactly what you needed.
Yeah. The AI did a good job with me.
Well,
scary stuff.
Yeah. One good thing AI has done.
For our listeners out there who may not be that familiar with Steely Dan, though, I will say, I know who most of our main listeners are, and I can tell you that most of our main listeners are Steely Dan fans to at least some degree. But for those who may be tuning in for the first time or may be unfamiliar with the band or this album, we have everyone's favorite segment to catch them up on the band and the album, and it's called The Beginner's Guide to Steely Dan's Can't Buy a Thrill in 60 Seconds, and I'm doing it today.
Yeah. So Manny, before you make your case, and before we evaluate your case, we're gonna attempt to make a case here, and you get to evaluate how well you think Tyler has done on whatever sort of scale or rubric you see fit. It can be out of 10, it can be letter grades, it can be Michelin stars, whatever you want to, however you want to evaluate.
You're an academic. We trust you. We trust you in that sense.
Be careful.
I will. Don't worry.
All right, Tyler, are you ready?
Yes, I think I am.
All right, I'm going to start the clock in 3, 2, 1, go.
Hope you grabbed your bad sneakers and a pina colada, my friend. The time we all knew would come has arrived. It's Steely Dan time. This is their big debut. It's like a dream come true. Walter Becker and Donald Fagen met in 1967 while doing what some might call studying at Bard College in Annandale-on-Hudson, New York. Fagen heard Becker practicing guitar, took a liking to his sound, and bluntly asked him if he'd like to form a band. Easy peasy. They began playing together and writing with various cohorts and a distinct lack of listenership in New York, before decamping to sunny Los Angeles and assembling a group of musicians they and producer Gary Kurtz deemed talented and technical enough to hang with them musically. This group included guitarist Denny Diaz, Jeff Skunk Baxter, drummer Jim Hodder, and perennially underrated singer David Palmer. Their debut album, Can't Buy a Thrill, initially garnered expectedly mixed reviews, but was lauded by many for being so complete you could hardly believe it was a debut. A mainstay on all your expected best of all time lists, the record established the intricate, swinging Latin and R&B style of R&B stuff. Dang. Ooh, I wasn't good today.
You had a lot to cover in 1 minute too, though.
There was a lot.
Well, man.
I love the introduction, the pina colada. Sorry if I interrupt. I love the introduction. Grab the pina colada. It was great.
Okay, good. I hope I get points for that.
So, Manny, if you had to evaluate his introduction, what would you say? What sort of score or evaluation, or I don't know, whatever you want to give it?
Well, so I guess we gotta give him A- just because he cut off the end.
Fair enough.
Which, probably not. I think you should give him extra point because he made like a very kind of succinct description of the band, like in about a minute, which was great because I love the introduction, and I feel like that's every time I read some Steely Dan biography or stuff, that's basically what you get out of the like these two kids starting, somewhere in the middle of Bard College and then getting all the way up. ladders. So no, I think Tyler made a great job doing this.
Thanks, Manny. I wrote down A- plus a little bit. That's what I got.
Right, A- plus a little bit. Yeah, right. That's like 3.975. That's kind of
3.9. Hey, I'm not upset with that. I was an A student. I was an A student back in the day, but I don't need to be now. I don't have to be. Grades are just ideas.
Right.
So now, Manny, what we like to do is we give the listeners a little bit of a view of the album that we'll be talking about, the artist that we'll be talking about. But this show really is about you at the end of the day. And something we like to ask our guests when they come on is just sort of to characterize what role music plays in their life in general. So we can get a sense of kind of what relationship you have with it. So how would you characterize that relationship for you?
Music for me has been like one of the most important things because I always wanted to be a musician, right? Since I was 3 years old, I remember seeing this picture of myself, and my father used to play a guitar, just strumming. Like he has a 12-string guitar, and I was like sitting by himself with a fake guitar, just like strumming, like for fake, right? But I felt that's how music got into me since I was very young. So then I try a bit of piano, it doesn't go through, a bit of classical guitar, and I'm like, it's interesting, but not probably my thing. And then I go into electric guitar, and I'm like, oh, wow, that's my instrument. And I've been, playing that since I was 9-10 years old. I started to play electric guitar and never stopped. And I go, when I was about 10 years ago, I was really into that. I'm like, I want to be a musician. That's what I want to do. And I, got a diploma with electric guitar, studied different things, harmony, theory and a bunch of stuff. And, but then I never got like courageous to say, okay, I want to just do music and that's it. Because it's always like, a risky enterprise. You have to keep it on the side. But I had tons of different band, a bit of rock, blues, some jazz stuff, acoustic things, pop, been playing a lot. So music has been really, really one big thing for me. I really wanted to be a musician. So I'm now, I just have less time to play, but I still like music is very important. Everywhere I go, I have to know that my guitars are somewhere around so I can pick them up and play whenever I want to. So that music has been the big thing for me, really. It's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, and you I mean, it sounds like you're asking the question that a lot of people who have, been creative in their life, who have kind of like taken their creative expression as something that they seriously want to make an enterprise in their life, and like figuring out how to balance it, which I think is really, I mean, it's a tale as old as time, isn't it? But also, like figuring out how to do it in the context of working another job is a worthy challenge. Well, how do you find yourself most inspired by music right now in terms of playing it? Like, are you really interested in recording, or are you really interested in writing your own songs, or is it live performance that really is most inspiring for you as a musician? Where would you say you feel most free as a musician right now?
It's really kind of mixed feelings because I've been recording a song last year, like an instrumental song. I played. I love acoustic guitar, so I got this acoustic guitar when I was in New York City, and I recorded this song. It was November 2021. Yeah, so it was a bit more than a year ago. But this song I wrote it like 10 years ago. Like really was something that one night I was inspired. I started to write this song. I record this song, and then I'm like, oh, wouldn't it be nice to record an whole album of acoustic stuff, like instrumental things? So then, I start to work a bit on that, and then I put it on the side. Then I develop idea. In the meanwhile, I listen to other music, so I start to play other things. And you're like, oh, wow, I would love to do live performance, right? But recording also our own thing would be great. So I have this idea of probably at some point finding the time to record maybe an album of my song that I wrote or some cover as well. But I've been mostly playing like cover and of different, sort of band, different sort of music. Never Steely Dan though, so my bad. They're quite.
Wait, why is it just that it's more difficult, or is it just the sort of music where you need, and there need to be more than just you to play it? Like you need like everyone there to really form the ensemble.
So I think it's both. Well, because first of all, you need like a whole band with people that know how to play this stuff. Because this is really like jazz root. I will talk more about this later. Right. But, it's really all this influence that you need a good musician to play that stuff. The other thing is that when I used to have my band back home in Italy, I didn't really know Steely Dan. So I never come up and say, hey, let's play a Steely Dan song. That would be cool, right? So we always played other stuff. And then when I start to know this band, I was like, oh, now I don't have like a band to put together, and just do like a Steely Dan tribute. That would be tons of work that you have to find aside because that would be like, gathering the musician, and musicians are not like the easiest creature to deal with on earth, right? So
Oh, we're theater artists. We know about that.
sometimes can be challenging, right? And you get all this sort of vision figuring out the band, and that will be also a big band because there were so many people, so many instruments. So it's really like difficult to put them together, like in a quick way, right? So, but I would love to. I mean, playing their music, that would be great.
Can I give him some points real quick? I just want to give him some
Oh yeah,
points.
yeah. Go
right
ahead,
quick.
do some points.
So you gave me that A minus plus a little bit for my recap. Much appreciated. We need to get your points rolling on the board so that we have something to grade you against. I'm going to give you 600 points for the fact that you've been a musician for all these years, but you've never seriously played any Steely Dan music, because I think that that means it occupies a special echelon for you. So 600 points for that. Well done.
So I think it's time to talk about this album specifically. So Manny, can you remember how, when, where you discovered this album for the first time?
Yeah, so actually I didn't really go into the album because I got into the song that was a specific song that first was Do It Again. But, it popped up like on the Spotify thing. And actually, I didn't realize from that. I don't look at the album. I just listen to the song. Oh, wow, that's a cool song. I know this. And then another day, this was about, I think, a year ago or so. I have this kind of routine in the morning. When I wake up, I put up some music, right? And I usually always go listen to what I like, so you don't get to discover too much. You go back to the song you already know. But that morning, I let Spotify play something, and goes into Kings, this song from Steely Dan, that album. I'm like, oh wow, this song is amazing. Like, which album is this? Which song is this? I go there, I look it up, and that was Can't Buy a Thrill. So then I start to listen to the whole album, and I'm like, that's an amazing album. I didn't know about this stuff of Steely Dan, and then I start to read a bit more about the album, first album they released. Back in 72, anyway, all these things. So that's how I really got into that album, because but there was hit over there in that album. There were 2 or 3 hits, but I didn't really connect when I first listened to the song, So I'm always quite lazy in terms of doing the work. Well, let me see which album is this. Let me see what the words say. I just get fascinated by the music, and I'm like, oh wow, this is amazing. What an arrangement, what a harmony. Like, I love this.
900 points for being lazy about it. I think being lazy about music is underrated, because we're inundated with. I've been experiencing this too, and we've talked about this a bit on the podcast. We're just inundated with music, inundated with new music all the time, and so being a little lazy about finding it, I think, can be helpful, because you sort of recreate that moment of inspiration or that moment of connection that we might have had when our relationships with music were slower. So 900 points for being lazy about it.
Wow. Wait, one question now. What's the scale you are rating me? Because if the scale is from 0 to 500, I'm doing great. If it's on 1,000, I'm doing well.
The scale changes all the time. I know you're a finance guy, Manny, but the scale changes all the time. And so you just have to stay on your toes.
Okay. All right. Okay, that's great. I'll take whatever.
So okay, I'm gonna come right out here and say this, because I feel our listeners need to know this.
Get ready for this. You're about to be angry, because I was angry when I heard this.
I'm not a Steely Dan hater, but I don't get it. I don't fully understand what it is. I mean, I can appreciate the sort of musical complexity of the things that the music that they've made. As the music nerd in me really gets it, and I can I took classical piano for 13 years. I can understand all that, but I don't there just seems to be this phenomenon, and lately too, I feel like there's been this resurgence of Steely Dan in the cultural zeitgeist. And so I'm wondering if you can tell me, Manny, what was it when you heard Kings, when you heard Do It Again, and all the other tracks on this album? What is it specifically about Steely Dan that draws you in?
Right. So about that track, about Kings, it's just the soul that pop up all of a sudden, because it's an incredible thing that they just guitar play kind of rhythm thing in the back quite easy, and then all of a sudden comes out this soul that just smack into your face, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. That's what really attracted me with the song. But so that's more specific, right? But for the band itself, I would say it's really the groove the kind of harmony they have. So then I look it up, to some of the music sheet and all the chart that they have was very interesting chord changes. So I got really hooked up with all those things, like, wow, that's really the cool things. And, the voice, of Donald Fagen, I really like that kind of voice he has. So that I was, wow, that's a great thing. I really like that stuff, but let's get more like, right, subjective and thing. But what hooked me up a lot was that groove, that mix of different Latin blues, a bit of jazz, a bit of rock, soft rock, that really you can put it there and it goes great. And that with the harmony, I love this.
I'm gonna blow up the scale here, and I'll give you 3,000 points for the groove being the thing, because I also agree with that. And you said something interesting, that you really appreciate Donald Fagen's voice, because Michael's I'll expose Michael's argument here a little bit, but Michael was talking about how his favorite songs on this album are the ones that David Palmer sings. Which I don't think is wrong either, though. I'm personally a fan of Donald Fagen's voice and his solo work too. But I think that Palmer's presence on this album in particular does give it an element that later albums don't have. Obviously, he kind of phases out of the band after this album is released. But he has a beautiful voice, David Palmer, as well.
Oh, I think absolutely he does. And there is, I don't know if you guys, I read this detail just before while I was doing a bit of research on the album and the song itself. And the reason why I brought in David Palmer is that Donald Fagen thought that, his voice wasn't good enough for the song. Mm-hmm. So they said, okay, we got to find a good vocalist that really can sing well. And they got him into this. And I mean, I agree. His voice is great. The thing is that I always got used to other Steely Dan song while Donald Fagen kind of take control of the old song. So then that was the kind of voice I was used to hearing their song. So when I heard the other one, I'm like, well, these are interesting. Like in the I
will agree that Donald Fagen's voice, and he sings lead on most Steely Dan songs, I would say, aside from when Michael McDonald is briefly in the band. But I think that even though I prefer Palmer's voice, I feel like Donald Fagen's voice is the sound of Steely Dan. Like, that's why I think, like, when I was listening to this album in preparation for this episode, every song I was like, wait, who's singing this? Because it's like 4 different lead singers on this album, it seems like. And so I was almost caught off guard because I hadn't realized how many different people sang on the first album.
Yeah, in fact, there are different singers over there. There is Donald Fagen, there is Walter Becker, there is David Palmer, there was the drummer singing a song. And then in the last track of the album, it's 3 of them, which I think is Donald Fagen, Walter Baker, and the other one might be
and Palmer, I think.
And Palmer, probably. Yeah, I can't remember if it was
last name Hodder. Is that his name?
Oh, he's the drummer. He's the drummer.
Yeah. I think it was the other one singing, if I'm correct. Yeah. So you got really lot of singers in that album, which is an interesting thing.
So you knew Do It Again. I'm assuming you knew Reelin' in the Years, just from, being a person who listens to music over the years. Right. See, for me, when you chose this album, what was interesting to me is this is not the Steely Dan album that I would have chosen as the perfect album. Right. I was first exposed to Asia, which I think that's probably my forever Steely Dan album. But what I think is so interesting about this one is that it's almost like the other songs get buried a little bit by the popularity and ubiquity of Do It Again, Reelin' in the Years, because songs like Fire in the Hole and Dirty Work, I mean, Dirty Work's pretty popular too, but those songs they'll get overshadowed, I think, a lot of the time. So that the process of you discovering this album probably unearthed a lot of these gems. I know it was gratifying for me to prepare for this recording by revisiting those other songs. Do you think that those songs, Reelin' in the Years, like the kind of main popular ones, do you think they hold up? Do you think that you consider them top tier Steely Dan songs, or is it the other songs on the album that kind of keep you listening?
Well, I have those definitely Do It Again, Reelin' in the Years. They are the hit of the album, and that's what got them very famous by that time. So absolutely, these are kind of big thing. But I feel like the very interesting part about the other song is all this kind of I would say, again, the groove that they have, especially that I don't find it in Reelin' in the Years or in Do It Again, because Do It Again is also an interesting song because all these hit in the radio, they used to start with kind of major chords and happy mood. And that song is kind of all minor chords. So most of them are minor chords again. So you have all this kind of mood that keeps it a bit sad, kind of a bit like not really great vibes. Whereas the other song that I felt that, as you said, they're more underrated, but they have that kind of good kick that I think the other song don't have. So probably what makes me listen to the album too is like getting attracted to those songs that are less famous than the most one. Like I love Dirty Work, for instance, but
Dirty Work's amazing. Yeah,
it's an amazing song. The sound that they have, and that was all great. But really, what makes me listen to the album is like the other song. And the one that I love is Brooklyn's "Holds the Charge." Yeah, that's
yes. Brooklyn is an amazing song. I will say that I've tried to make Dirty Work my karaoke song, and I don't quite have the voice for it. I wish I did.
That's tough. I mean, I wish I could sing those songs, but I've been trying to sing here and there, but my voice is not trained. You need to get like good training.
Yeah.
They have like high pitch sometimes. It's hard to get.
It sounds to me like you really. It's clear to me that the kind of music, the instrumental music, is the thing that you connected with most immediately with Steely Dan and with this album in particular. How do you find the lyrical content of this album? Is it something that you've really formed a connection with, or do you? Have you dug much into the lyrics on this album?
Here is probably where I'm going to fail the test because I'm always really bad at lyrics. Because, as a musician, a guitar player, the first thing that attracts me is music, right? And this is also in Italian song. If I listen to an Italian song maybe 10 times, probably after the 10 times I start to pay attention to the lyrics. Because before I'm still like kind of involved and attracted by the harmony that they have, sometimes trying to figure out, which chord are they playing, that which kind of sound is that, which guitar sound they got. So I get complete another dimension where I forget about what the song is about. And actually, the funny thing in the song Kings, I just went this morning, I opened up the lyrics and I'm like, let me see what this song is really talking about. Because I never took the time to sit down. And, I was catching words here and there. And sometimes, I'm not native speaker, so sometimes I have to look it up, all the words, because I can't really understand what they're saying.
Yeah.
They use like, kind of weird word for me that I never heard about before. So I'm like, okay, I have to read this, sit down and start to read this. And I feel like I have to do this more. So definitely in the case of Steely Dan was much more the music. But when I paid attention time to the lyric, I felt that there was like a lot going on under those stuff without knowing anything about the story of the album, because this tend to be also kind of more concept album, right, in a sense.
Yeah, I'd say so.
There are some songs that kind of relate to each other in an interesting way. So, and when you start to listen like what they're talking about, also the lyrics becomes like, okay, they're talking about like important themes back in the day that were going on, and they try to kind of either be ironic on this or raising some sort of criticism and kind of social awareness about what's going on that people they think they should have known about.
I mean, I would say "Fire in the Hole" is as good an anti-war song as anything, after Woody Guthrie, right? And when you really listen to it, on that level, I think you get another element of who these guys were and kind of the community they were a part of. So that's always really gratifying to me. And then like the songs that they're personal, but in a sort of like very surreal way, maybe is the word I'm looking for. It's a very theatrical, like lyrically theatrical in a very satisfying way to me. I'm going to give you 9,000 points for listening to a song 10 times, and maybe on the 10th time, that's when you start listening to the lyrics.
Okay. Much better than I thought.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
I feel like there's also, you were talking, Tyler, about the lyrical quality. I feel like it's almost, there's like not a detachment, but that's the best word I can think of, because they're not smacking you in the face with the sort of satirical message, and they're also not really smacking you in the face with whatever sort of emotional experience they're having. It feels like it's almost muted, but muted's not the right word either, because it's still present. It's just not in your face.
Well, look at Dirty Work, right? Let's say, light the candle, put the lock upon the door. You have sent the maid home early, like 1,000 times before. It's pretty clear what's going on, right. Like we're getting ready to do it. We're getting ready to do it, but then it's the turn that I feel like makes that lyrically a really interesting song, where it's like, oh, this is forbidden love, this is or at least forbidden sex. There's some generally I feel like they're lyrically find a very good turn, a very good opposite in a song that I found very satisfying. And like, if I may say so, I feel like has influenced my writing style over the years, just in the sense that like creating something familiar, creating some, like when you're writing pop songs, creating familiarity does seem to me to be like an essential part of that recipe. And then doing something unexpected within that is kind of where the magic happens, in my opinion. And I think they hit that several times on this album, not on every song, but or maybe on every song. I'm willing to say that they achieve that in some way on every song.
Yeah, I think actually, I agree with what Mike was saying before, that actually, there is this kind of like, this social awareness doesn't really kind of smack into your face or demeanor, right? I think you have to really pay attention to that and try to kind of read out loud the lyrics and try to feel what they were trying to say, because there is some like kind of hidden meaning over there, maybe that they're trying to get, or something else. But that, I would say, when I do that, then that makes for me the album and the song even more interesting, because I'm like, okay, well, these people were not just like, great musicians, but these were like, people that knew talking about what was going on. And when they kind of, I feel band are able to kind of combine these two aspects, on the one hand, the kind of great music thing, and on the other, thinking about the song and what's really the relationship to the time they're living, the social status, of that society.
Yeah.
Like, that's amazing. I feel like, wow, that's very cool.
And they're notoriously meticulous as well, right? That is the reputation that they have. They are the meticulous 70s, like called anti-hero, anti-heroes of the 70s rock scene, which I think is an interesting characterization of them and their attitude. But like, I think it is the intricacy of these songs that is what's given them such a staying power in some ways, because they're hard. They're not easy songs, and they're not easy to replicate. When we asked you if you had ever played Steely Dan songs, it sort of doesn't surprise me that you haven't really, because the effort required to like either put a new spin on that as a cover, or to try to be as faithful to the original version as possible. Either one of those would be a pretty big task with these songs. I think it might be a good time for us to talk about what your standout track is from this album. You've mentioned it already. What did you choose as your standout track?
So I choose Kings.
Well, let's give it a listen, and then we'll talk a little bit more about it when we come back. See you in a minute. That's the end of part 1. If you access this episode via our YouTube playlist, you're about to hear our guest's standout track. If you'd like to jump ahead to part 2, you'll find a link in the description of this episode.